everyone, and welcome to another SheClicks webinar. Tonight's webinar is sponsored by Nikon UK, one of the leaders in digital imaging, precision optics, and photo and video capture technologies. Nikon continues to support its own community and beyond with inspiring content from talented female photographers from across the spectrum. For more information, visit nikon.co.uk. So thank you very much to Nikon UK for sponsoring us tonight. Tonight we're hearing from Carolyn Mendelsohn, and it's her second webinar in recent times, and I'm delighted tonight she's going to be talking to us about creating compelling portraits. So Carolyn, hello, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. It's lovely to be here again.
Thank you, it's great to see you. You look really well.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to go through my journey, my actual journey of how I became a portrait photographer, and also give you lots of tips on the way. I'm going to look at lifestyle, I'm going to look at compelling portraits, and I'm also going to look at story-based portraiture and fashion-based portraiture, and I hope you enjoy it. Any questions you have, just put them in Q&A, and I'll do my very, very best to answer them. But yeah, shall I start?
Fantastic. Great. Yes, go for it.
Thank you. So I've told a lot of, I think quite a few of you know my story, but my story, I'm going to do a very short version of my story because I think it is one of the reasons I am a photographer. So, so why photography? Well, actually, as some of you may know, I didn't start as a photographer. I started as an actor in theatre, and I then moved into directing, and I then moved into filmmaking. But photography has always been really important to me. And one of my first memories is standing in front of this beautiful print, Winter Mist, by a photographer called Emile Bertine, who was a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society. Now this print was taken by Emile, I think probably, it says the date there, but I think probably in the 40s, maybe 30s or 40s in Europe. It's the Black Forest. And he was my great uncle. You know, he died many years before I was born. But as a child, this hung in my grandparents' house. He was a photographer and traveled through war-torn Europe taking photographs, and this was one of them. And as a child, I used to sit in front of this photograph and I would imagine myself in it. I just found it really entrancing and really compelling. And when I look at images and photographs that I love now, it is the fact that I feel drawn in that makes me love them more. And so though this is a landscape, though I think there's a little figure there, what I love to achieve in my own work is the same effect that I want people to stop, and I want people to look, and I want people to go into the picture. So it might be interesting for you to look at work that you absolutely love and try to work out what it is about it and then apply it to your own work. So yes, Emile was a photographer, and my family was full of photographers. Most of them were did it as hobbies, but they were, every bit of my life was documented like this. This I've shown before when I was 12 on the left and when I was 10 on the right. And so every single element of my life, there was a parent or a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt who would be standing there taking photographs of it. Fantastic when you're older, and we have so many wonderful family albums going back over 100 years. But as a young person, I found it really invasive, and I had a real aversion to the act of photography. I loved pictures, but I really never ever imagined that I was going to be a photographer. But something happened. So as I mentioned before, I was an actor and worked in theatre and directed, and then I became a filmmaker. I did sometimes do stills photography, but not in any serious way. Now, in 2006, I had my third child, Poppy. So I had 3 children under 6, and I had moved to Bradford, and I found myself really lost. And my husband the reason I felt lost was because I couldn't do anything creative anymore. I couldn't travel. I felt like my identity had changed. And my husband had bought me, probably 6 months before, a Nikon D70. And I ignored it. Isn't that really awful? I ignored this Nikon. Then Poppy got to about 6 months old, and I thought, right, I'm going to pick up the Nikon. Not that I want to be a photographer, I'm going to pick that Nikon up. And I picked the Nikon up and I had a complete epiphany. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I just took photographs. I joined a website called Flickr, which was in its early days in 2007. I shared my work. I was obsessed with learning as much as I possibly could. I also loved playing with the photographs. I loved putting textures on them. I liked just playing around, like a lot of you probably do, but the feeling was the best feeling, just having something and some tool that I could be creative in. And I got so much positive feedback that it felt like the right thing to do. Now, this is a really weird pixelated photo, but that happens to be me, and I'm just going to share with you this photo. So let me go back to Flickr. Flickr in 2007 put out a call for photographers for a new Channel 4 program, a new groundbreaking reality television program looking for the next emerging digital photographer. Now, you have to put this into context. I had only been taking photos for 6 months, but I thought, why not apply? So I stuck in an application I had done, and then I got shortlisted and got to the final 300, went down to London, I then I had to put a portfolio together. Now, I had never put a portfolio together, so I worked with a friend on this portfolio, and she helped me put it together. And then I had to be interviewed and I had to do all these exercises, and I didn't even know how to use my camera properly. I knew how to see a good photo. I knew how to press the shutter button. I had a good visual eye. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I was sitting with people that were doing, that were fashion photographers, that had done documentary photography, that had done MAs and or had really were well established. And then there was me. I got a place on this reality television program looking for the next emerging digital photographer. I was horrified when they told me, but being a risk taker, I decided I would still go for it. And Martin Parr was one of the judges. Brett Rogers from the Photographers Gallery was one of the judges. And we had to, like they do in these programs, had to do these challenges. And it was absolutely terrifying. So there were 3 programs, myself and another very well-known photographer now, Jay Mawson. We kind of lasted the first episode, but obviously a lot of people knew who I was at that point. And my thing was, I wanted to prove that I really knew how to take a good photo, because I was torn to shreds for using Photoshop, and I was torn to shreds for using textures and for playing around, because it was the art photography world. But let me go. So my thing was, if anyone ever thinks I can't possibly do something, I set myself to prove them wrong. So I went on, my next learning curve was I wanted to know how to use my camera inside out. And I wanted to prove that not only could I take photographs, but I could be a great photographer. And that involved lots and lots of hard work. Still working hard now. So, you know, basically my basics, and I put according to me, because I think basics are different according to everyone. Photographic images and why they work, how you can make a good photographic image. Number 1, light. Light is always the most important thing. Always look for that beautiful light. Number 2, composition. If you know how to compose a photograph, you are halfway there. If you're doing people photography, it's connecting to the person you're taking a portrait of, or connection to the subject. And the final one is having an idea, being creative, taking risks, trying things out. So I've talked about how my photography began. Now, I didn't initially start off with portraiture, but I absolutely love people. And what I did after this program, after my experience of being on this program, was I decided to set myself projects. And one was to look at portraiture. And so one of the projects I did was literally, I got a 85mm 1.4 lens, and that was the most wonderful thing. And I used that, so I invested my money in that lens, and I used that, and I just took photographs of people's faces. So those people that loved all my texture work were a bit disappointed, because now I was on a mission to prove that I could take a great portrait. But I took hundreds of pictures of people's close-up faces. And the reason was I just wanted to understand how I could do it and what things worked. So let's go through some of them. Oh, I think the first picture I'm going to show, all right. So let's go. So yeah, we look at quality of light, connection. You look at the background and the texture in the background, the lens, and the choice depends on the subject, and also what is in and outside the frame. When you look at my pictures, and I'm going to show you them really soon, my pictures tend to be quite still. I'm not an action photographer. I'm quite an active person, but I like to be very calm and very zen when I take a photograph. So this photo is of Germaine Greer. Now I'm going to share something with you. I took this photograph not when I was on my mission to take photographs. I took this photograph when I was on Picture This, the program. We were told that one of our challenges was to take a portrait of a celebrity in a studio. Now you can imagine me, my camera on auto, never been in a studio before, completely terrifying. But what I knew that I could do, and this is, I really want you to think about this, what I knew I could do was I know that I can connect with people. I did a bit of research, and Germaine Greer had done an essay on Christine Keeler, and Christine Keeler's famous portrait of her sitting on that iconic portrait of the chair. And I wanted to reflect that when I took the portrait. I also wanted it to be really quite real, for her to be connected to me. And luckily in the studio, it was a studio in London, there were assistants, so I could say exactly how I wanted the light. And that was my first proper portrait. It taught me a huge amount. So I left, you know, this television program, and I then, so a lot of these photos are ancient. So that's my daughter Poppy when she was like 18 months old, and she's now 14. But I wanted to really practice taking pictures that told a story or had some meaning. So I was on my mission. So let's go through. Okay, so this photo is my son Oscar, who's now 20, and he was about 7. And this kind of changed my photographic world. I got hold of the 85 lens onto my Nikon. I had used a wide aperture 1.4, and I wanted it to be a black and white, really striking portrait. I didn't want it to be a snapshot. I wanted it to be well composed. I wanted to feel something when I looked at that picture. So that is one of my oldest pictures, but that kind of set the track, and that was one of many, many portraits, many faces I took photos of. And this, let's move on a bit. Shortly after being on that television program, people started to say, would I do shoots for them? Now that was really pretty terrifying to me. And I said yes to this huge family. Now, I was not a professional photographer at that point, but I did a lot of research. I thought about the pictures, I thought about the lenses I was going to use. And I still quite like these pictures, but it was always about a good composition and interesting stories and the characters involved. Now, I did lots of photographs in my early days of my children. So this is Sam and Poppy. This is what we were on holiday in Greece. Poppy was probably about 3, Sam was 4. And there was just something beautiful and magical, end of day. And I just want you to look at things for things like just the simplest of compositions. Right, and here's another one, again, my daughter, and I call it Canute. And I really love the way she is holding her hands out. So I'm looking at it being composed and the rule of thirds. and I still like these photographs. Now this again taught me a huge amount. This is my husband John and my daughter Poppy. Again, she was just a speck of a girl, again about 18 months, maybe a little bit older. And my husband was going to work and I saw them there standing by the door. But what I did notice was the beautiful, beautiful light. So I often ask people, what light do you think I used? And people think it's like a studio light because it's very cinematic. Now, this is why I want you to really think about the light. I noticed this amazing light shining on them from way back they were standing near the door, and the light was actually coming from a small window right at the back of the hallway. And I ran to get my camera with my beautiful lens, and I didn't know that it would turn out, but I took that photo. And what I love is that there's a connection between both of them. But most of all, I love the quality of that light. And that's what I really want you to take with you. So this is Freya. Now, I talked about having ideas. Sometimes I have ideas and I want to try them out. So this, you can look at this picture and come up with all sorts of different stories. And Freya is a friend of my daughter's, and I literally thought, what would it be like if I took a photo of Freya through a rainy window? I kind of knew I wanted something dramatic and mysterious. And she sat in the car, and I looked out and I exposed for her face. And this is a photo that I've always found. I'm so glad that I had an idea and I tried that idea out. Sometimes ideas don't work, but I think you should always just try things out. If they don't work, you try different ways of doing them. Again, this is Poppy. So, you know, I tell the stories through my photos. So I think the Guardian printed this. So my daughter was and still is obsessed with football, and she liked playing football with her older brothers, and she fouled them. So she got a red card. Probably one of her older brothers gave her the red card. And then I had to take a photo. She was standing by the garage. I really loved when I look at it. I like the background. I like the color. And she is fuming and furious, but that was very much her. So again, you know, if you have family, they can be your subjects. So this is my son Oscar. Again, he's 20, and he was about 7. And some of these photographs, what I love is, again, I talk about the light and the composition. So have a look at this light. People don't often like using the dappled light, but I just felt it would be really, really dramatic. And he loved playing the violin. He still plays the violin. So we went out and he played the violin. And what I looked for was how that bow echoes the reeds. And again, I used my portrait lens, which was an 85. I'll talk about lenses later on. So this has been used as the book cover before. And again, Poppy. At this point, Poppy must have been about 7, maybe 8, and I was a photographer at this point, and I was off just about to do a shoot, and I looked around, and there she was sitting with her book, and the light on her was absolutely beautiful. And so I got my camera out and I just called her name, and she glared at me, and I took the photo. Just going to share something with you. At this point, I wasn't sure whether I should be a photographer anymore. I don't know whether you ever feel that you lose the plot a bit when you kind of lose the inspiration. This was one of those points. So but this photo was just before a lifestyle shoot I was doing. And I remember entering the photo to Professional Photography magazine. And I thought, okay, I'll enter it. If something comes, then that will be good. And the photograph was the winner of Lifestyle Photographer of the Year, which in 2013. So it kind of changed my world for a bit. And I suddenly thought, okay, I can do this. Let's move on. Again, this is a photograph. It's a holiday photo. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because I want to show you that you can take really beautiful, striking portraits in your day-to-day life. You need to look for the light and the moment. And I noticed there was that grey. We go to the Isles of Scilly every year. We go to Bryat, and there was Poppy standing looking probably at crabs or shellfish and or little fish, and the light was just that dark light before it's going to either pour down with the sun coming through, and it told me a story, so I took the picture. This is from a lifestyle shoot I was doing for a family, a little boy, and I had to take this little boy on a whole journey, because working with subjects, it's not always easy. Some young people, some people don't like having their photograph taken. So what this little boy did love was the idea that there were fairies and magical things, and it was that beautiful light. So we went on this journey throughout the shoot where we were looking for magical things. And what I absolutely love is that backlight at the end of the day. It's quite hard to handle, but it just, the freedom of his movement. So though he's not posing for me, he's going on this adventure, and I'm taking this portrait of him with that beautiful end of daylight. Again, from another shoot I took, it was a really horrendous day, and this brilliant young woman, she was her 17th birthday, and it was so frozen, and we went out to do the shoot, and it was all blowy, but I just thought there was something amazing about how she looked and how her hair was, and I'm always looking for those interesting compositions. I rescheduled the shoot actually, but this is one of the photographs I took because she was so bitterly cold, and I thought, no, we'll just take a few. But I just want to show you that it doesn't have to be like a perfect picture. You can use the weather to your advantage. As long as the person you're working with is feeling comfortable with it. I always make sure that at all points people are feeling comfortable. So I rescheduled, and what I really loved about her was that she had this really pre-Raphaelite look. So I had some clothes, and I said, and it was Bluebell season, and we rescheduled a few months later, and we did this kind of pre-Raphaelite fashion shoot, really, and thinking again about story and again about composition. And I'm always looking, when I'm taking portraits, I'm also looking at the line and the hands, and I think always look at people need to be relaxed. So if the hand is all clenched like that, it's not going to work. So I'm kind of talking to her at the same time, but I'm being very calm and talking about, we looked at pre-Raphaelite photograph at paintings, so that was what we were looking for. So the light's always really important, and this was last year. I was working, I was commissioned to take portraits of people living with dementia in a care home, and I was given a really difficult room to work in. So they said, okay, here's the room, and it was one of those rooms, it was just beige and really bright light, and I thought, how am I going to take these photos? It was a bedroom with bright light. So I managed to get one of the care workers to work with me, and we found a blanket, dark blanket, put it on the back of a cupboard, and then I looked at the light, and it's learning to use the light to your advantage. There were these blinds, and I closed the blinds until they had just a really tiny slit of light coming through. And I put a reflector, the diffusion side of a reflector in the gap where the light was coming through. And it made this beautiful light. And I worked very calmly, and I talked. And I think the interesting thing about working with people with dementia is that the camera is such a familiar object. So I'm working very quietly in a darkish space and getting a huge amount of calm there. So I'll show you a few more. So this lovely couple here, again, same room, but I wanted them to feel very comfortable. So it was about their relationship. If that light hadn't been so beautiful, I don't think the photograph would have been as moving. Well, it's moving to me because of their humanity. They're just two wonderful human beings. And I'm really keen on giving people dignity when I take photographs. All of these, I will be using my 85 lens. I tend to use prime lenses, but I'll talk about that in greater detail. And also I'm looking at, I sometimes use a 50. It depends on the room I'm in, the size of the room. So this was my dad's 80th birthday. And these are literally just shots. So again, I'm looking at using natural window light here. So just think about where the light's coming from. And sometimes I'll close the curtain a bit. So that's my son, and that's my dad. Two different spaces, two different times. But the window light works really beautifully. And they're kind of slightly candid, though my son, I probably got him to sit there. But my dad, that would have been candid. I love doing projects. So this is one, I was making a little film in Hexham, and I walked around and there were these amazing independent traders. This must have been about a long time ago, actually. It might even have been 10 years ago, which is quite horrifying to me now. But Derek was this really chatty, chirpy chappy, and I wanted him to, I went to all these different traders' shops and I said, can I take a photo? And they were all very happy, so I made an appointment to come back. Now, what I want to share with you is that I'm completely, a little bit, well, not completely klutzy, but people don't ever see me when I come to take their portrait. I don't come across as a big, important professional photographer. I'm just come as me with my camera. So in that way, I guess for them, it's slightly disarming. And with this, I did use a light, a flash through an umbrella. So often I'm just trying things out and practicing things. So I wanted a moment where Derek wasn't, he was like all singing or dancing. And I just wanted him to have that moment of calm. And that's when I took the picture. And this is the clock man. And again, I used an extra light, but you can use also, I think with lights, with flash, it is about experiment. I didn't get taught how to do things. I just taught myself. I experimented, I looked things up, I tried things out. The important thing about light is that you diffuse it as much as you can. But I'm looking at his connection with me, and I'm looking at something that represents his trade. And here's a selection. Again, that's the jewelry and clocks. And that's the butcher, and that's the fishmonger. I have a picture of the fishmonger with a huge monkfish. It's really appalling, this massive fish. But they love their photos, and the people, and Hexham asked me to come back. I didn't do, this was my own project the year later to take more. Again, I would be using my 85, I've still got it, my 85 lens, my Nikon 85 1.4. So I'm looking at more lifestyle photography here, and portraits. Always good to have an animal in a picture, I think. So I'm always looking at really interesting backgrounds. I'm looking at those moments of calm. And the colors here I love. It was just the back of a park. And I think his dog gave him that bit of company, so he wasn't feeling too self-conscious. Again, I love the wind, I love texture. So this is Maddie, and she's got amazing freckles. And when you focus and you're doing photography and you're using prime lens with portraiture, I would say always focus on the eyes. I use a spot focus, I focus on the eyes. I just love the messiness of this. I'm not one for like a really beautifully clean looking photo. I love the fact that she has spirit, and that's what I'm interested in. And these are just really straightforward artist photos. Hannah, who's a textile artist, I spent an afternoon with her, following her around. And again, I'm always looking for that light and for those little moments. And she's using these for her website. But yeah, 50mm lens, 35mm lens, or an 85. And I think I had to play around with the light in her little studio because it was quite dull. So I bounced, I had a flash and I just bounced it. But also you can use reflectors, are really useful. It's about finding where the light is, and you can kind of stand a reflector up to reflect that light back. And here, I think there was this light here, which I really like, was just her little lamp, which I love. I love the light quality there. And again, it's, I sometimes have to do things, I worry about certain jobs, and I traveled to London to do these portraits of this baby who I'd not met before. It was a gift to this family from somebody. But I'm always interested in background. I look for backgrounds. I look for the shape and the color and the texture. And I'm not a baby photographer, but I'm using myself and all that I know about photography to try to make these work. And again, this is, my sister lives here in Spain, and this was a little lifestyle shoot that I did whilst I was there. And these little details, the girl and her dog, and I'm looking at the composition of it, the two best friends, the mother and the daughter. And if you have a look at the light, it was at the end of the day. So I'm looking at doing light at the end of the day, and sometimes telling a little story as well. Again, there's a dog in that one. So this is my son Sam, who's getting his GCSE results tomorrow. So he was about 10 in that photograph, maybe 11. And that light was so beautiful. It was in our kitchen, and I saw it, and I got my camera, the 85, and I'm focused on his eyes, and he's looking up at me, connecting to me. So one thing is really important is when people are looking towards you, they're looking at you rather than staring at you. But I just love that beautiful light. And these are a mixture of kind of shoots that I've done. I get very excited when at the end of the day. If you find me in a wood at the end of the day, I'm really, really happy. And there's some playful shots here. And if you have a look, I'm always looking at interesting shapes, or just the simplest portrait. The simplest portrait. When I'm focusing on her, I would have had a wide aperture, and it becomes quite striking. No, it's not magical. The magic is the light, and the magic is being calm, and the magic maybe is having a little bit of knowledge as to how to use the equipment. But everybody can do it. And another one, end of the day, towards the end of the day near Liverpool Beach. But yeah, I just like the quality of light there. I'm a big fan of light and the connection, and being playful. Be playful and enjoy taking photos. And these are just more kind of headshots, portraits. But I had one meeting with her, and again, I'm looking at using my 85 as much as I can. And working with her, she was not happy about having a picture taken before I started. But my thing when I'm working with people to take their portraits, my main thing is that they have a really nice time, and that they forget that I'm taking their portrait, or it just becomes part of something we're doing, part of the thing we're experiencing. So what I sometimes do is I'll go with the person, and we'll look at the clothes they're going to wear, and we'll pick clothes that will work for this kind of shoot. But you can do that with ordinary, with a shoot of your own family. You can style it if you want to. so yeah, being in between. I'll just flash through being in between because I think you can have a look at the webinar. So my personal projects are what keeps me going, and being in between is the project I started 6 years ago. That's being kick-started, and that was Mabel. But I'll just go through because I just want you to look at how I have talked to those girls and worked with them so that they are connecting with me through the camera, showing who they really are, standing in a way that is comfortable to them. It's a big learning curve doing this sort of project. So I'd never worked on anything as large scale as this before. I'd never get a PhD, but this is my PhD. So, and this is the kind of mock-up of the book. So the reason I'm showing you these is because I think it's really important to have your little projects that you learn from, or that you want to find out about the world through. So the things to think about: back to basics, and I mentioned them before. Right, a lot of you can block your ears and close your eyes for this bit, but composition is how you make a photograph visually stronger. Think of a grid and think of the rule of thirds. So I'm going to show you a grid. I know a lot of you will already know this, but I'm always going on about it. So there's the grid. So you place where they cross. That's where you place the subject, or the important thing you want people to look at, because it makes it more interesting than if you just put it down there or up there. Or you might put the landscape there, the sand, it depends. That could be the sand, that could be the sky, and there could be a little building there. So points of interest is where you place the person or the object. So I've just sharing you this. I took this in lockdown of my husband, who had run out of the house and gone for a bit of quiet in the greenhouse. So he's doing a bit of work and a bit of thinking. But I put it there because actually it's kind of, I wanted you to see how I use that rule of thirds. So it's a simple photograph that I took during lockdown. Light can be really hard to deal with until you get really familiar with it. And when there's really bright sun, that sun that you get in a hot summer's day, or in the winter when it's really harsh in the midday, you can still take photographs, but I think the best thing to do is to find open shade. So that might be underneath a tree, or at the side of a wall, side of a building where the person's not being hit directly. Diffuse, make sure the light is as diffused as possible. I'm going to show you a little hand exercise. So I don't know whether you can see my picture of me, but I'll show it to you later if you can't. So what I do, I use my hand and I look at where the light is on my hand, where the light's going, and I move my hand around. And when it's because sometimes it's really dull outside and it's hard to tell where the light is. I look and I imagine that's the person's face, and I look around and I think, okay, the light looks good there, the light looks rubbish there, and I place them where the light on my hand looks good, because that's what will look good on their face, and usually it's quite diffused. I love backlight. I love playing around with flare at the end of the day, or low light. And artificial light is scary when you don't know how to use it, but honestly, it's literally just, I remember the most important thing that somebody said to me was, light is light. So for me, it's just been a case of learning step by step, one thing at a time. And when I've had shoots where my lights didn't work, and that was really, really worrying, so I then have to improvise, and I use whatever is available. So I'm just sharing it. This was a commercial shoot for a magazine, and I was working with, there was a family with like 5 little children, and the shoot was timed at, I don't know what, it was like 11 o'clock, and my heart sank. So I was having phone calls. This was done in near Halifax, I think, and I was having phone calls from an art director in London saying, all right, we're doing it at 11, and my heart sank because I knew it was going to be super bright. But I then had to think on my I had to think really carefully, and I just found as much diffused light as possible. And when I was working, it had to be quite natural looking, quite lifestyle. So I just just used what there was. And again, I'm looking at the shape there and the connection there. But just to say, it's quite scary when you're being paid to do a shoot and the light is against you. So I use all that I know to make that work. So connecting with your subject. How do you connect with the subject? You know, when you first start taking photos, it's quite terrifying. It can be when you're taking photos of people. Firstly, breathe. Because if you don't breathe, they won't breathe. If you hyperventilate, they will hyperventilate. And this is something I learned when I was working in theatre, when I was working as an actor. It's really nerve-wracking. And if you don't breathe, then your audience doesn't breathe. So I use that in my photography. So I want people to feel very relaxed. So I slow it all down. I breathe slowly. I calm. I have to think on my feet, but I'm not going to worry too much. It's not a race. So unless it's like a candid documentary photograph where actually people don't really know you necessarily, you're taking the photo, a portrait can be done slowly. You find the light. You can even show them this kind of this bonkers exercise, and then you can involve the person and then use your personality to make the person feel at ease. So if you're a klutz person like me, then use that to your advantage. So it's but also, don't be the bigger person. The person you're taking a photograph of is the most important person. As the photographer, you are not important. Your subject is really important. So just slow down, calm down, let them feel good and enjoy finding the light, involving the person and taking their picture. And if it doesn't work, you're not using film necessarily, so you can take more. And if it doesn't work, you just sit and think, how can I make this work better? My camera settings. So I've talked about camera settings, and I'm aware that some of you may have your kit lenses. Now, some of the earlier photos I showed you were on kit lenses, not on an 85. So again, that's about the composition and understanding the light. But what I use for portraits are 50, 85, sometimes I've got 135, and these are prime lens and fast primes. And what does that mean? It means that they can go to a really wide aperture, 1.4, let lots of light in, and therefore the shutter speed is you can use them really easily. The shutter speed is fast if you've got it at 1.4. I'm sure Angela will be shaking her head as I'm struggling to describe the technical side of this. But something interesting as well, if you're doing a shot of a group of people, then I will use a 35, or I'll step way back with my 85 or my 50. If I'm doing an environmental shot, like somebody in their environment, then I will use the 35 sometimes, so I can get where they are. I can get a head and shoulders or a full person shot and where they are. With zooms, really, you can get brilliant fast zooms, 24 to 70, 70 to 200. All of those are brilliant for portraits as well as landscapes. But if you don't have that, you can actually get a good secondhand 50mm lens, 1.8 really, really cheaply. So it's worth trying. It takes a little while getting used to primes because you have to move yourself to get the shot that you want. So your camera, learn about your camera. Learn about it, whether it's an SLR, a point and shoot, or a mobile. I've been working with teenagers and they have been creating the most amazing photographs on their mobile phones. So learn how to use it. Take your time, enjoy the experiments. So learn how to use the aperture, learn how to use the shutter speed, learn how to use the ISO. But aperture priority is your friend really when it comes to portraits, and when you're not so sure about using manual. I also use spot focus. I move it onto spot focus and I move the focus point around at the back of my camera. I always use manual settings unless unless it's a really challenging situation, then I'll use aperture priority. Always remember light, as I said, but if you're not so far ahead, what I mean is if you feel that you're still at the beginning of your photography journey, learn about the light and learn about the composition, and then you're just about there. With portraits, the wider aperture, which is a smaller number, gives you a shallow depth of field. That means the smaller area is in focus. So focus on the eyes, or face, 1.4, 2.8. If there is, this is a little trick I was taught. If you've got to take a photograph of a group, a portrait of a group, use the number of the people as the number of the aperture. So if you have 8 people, put it at 8f. As long as they're all on the similar focal plane, or 4 people. So don't go lower than that, because then you can make sure that they are all in focus. So again, find the light, connect your subject, think about it. Is it going to be a candid documentary shot or a considered portrait? So frame your shot. You don't have to snap, take your time. Often with children, I'm actually at their eye level, move down. You don't need to shoot from above, you can actually get down. Think about the perspective you're taking the portrait from. And also consider, is it a headshot? Is it head and shoulders? Is it half body? Is it full body? Is it an environmental shot? The background, I've got clutter question mark. Well, look for clear backgrounds unless the clutter is part of the story, part of the picture. Always make sure you don't have a tree growing out of somebody's head. Or I have taken photographs and not seen a bag of rubbish on the ground, and really regret it. I'm always looking at the background. If you're in an urban area, look for interesting walls, interesting backgrounds. And also, I love wild grass, long wild grass, as long as people don't have hay fever or allergies. Fields with wildflowers, I love them for portraits. Okay, I'm going to go through this again. So you're thinking about the light, end of day, beginning of day, or just finding that beautiful light in your house. Walk around your house and look for where the light, when you're looking at people, where are they when the light is looking beautiful on them? The lens choice, think about the lens choice, think about the location, think about your connection, think about how to do it, and think about the slowing down. And also look for, when you're finding the light, it's quite nice to get a little catch light in the person's eyes. If you can have a little assistant, somebody from your family, get a reflector, because often if the light isn't bright enough in your house, you can use a reflector to bounce light from somewhere onto their face and focus on their eye with a spot focus. So I'm going to go through this quickly. I think it's really good to open up your visual language, to look at artists, look at photographers. I talked about the pre-Raphaelites. A lot of my fashion work was really influenced by the pre-Raphaelites. Look at the work of other photographers. It's not about copying them. It's just about opening up your visual vocabulary. So I've just jotted down some of the people I love: Diane Arbus, Sally Mann, Ouija, Annie Leibovitz, Jacqueline Roberts, Renica Dijkstra, Red Saunders, Alice Tomlinson, Tish Merton. I've put Maurice Sendak, who I explain was actually drew children's books. This is Maurice Sendak. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because I love the quality of it. Like I like the pictures that I showed you, Emil's woodland picture. I love that, the story, the fact that I want to know more, and I'm applying that to my pictures, my portraits all the time. So that's Sally Mann, and she was quite controversial with a lot of her pictures, but I just love the whole challenging look of the young people and the whole composition of it. And that's Renica Dijkstra, who does really interesting work. It's worth looking her up. She's a contemporary Dutch photographer. So I'm going to show you some quick go through fashion story and fashion themed photography. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm now going to share hopefully a little film first. And what I'm going to show you is just story-based images and fashion-based images that I've taken, and just explain how I've done that. So let's have a look. So what goes into a good story, a good fashion, a story-based image or fashion-based image, and why story? So when I say a good story, and I'm talking about fashion, I'm talking about actually creating a story with the images. It helps move the images on. You can change clothes, you can change the direction of the shoot, and you have interesting end products. You can create a story with a series of photographs. And when you're doing fashion, you're looking at the clothes and the showing them and the details. So how do I approach this kind of shoot? Well, you saw two women in black with crows. That was like an album cover shoot with, it was Union Jill, a band called Union Jill. And I'm also going to show you a bridal editorial. I'm always looking at the format as well. So if it was an album cover, it may be a CD album, it may be a vinyl album. I'm looking at the shape and the size. If it's a magazine, I'm looking at where do they want the words to be, if it's a flyer or if it's a poster, or if it's just a beautiful set of portraits. I think with tips, look at magazines, look at all the high-end fashion magazines, any magazine with stories in. This will really help your portrait work as well, make it really exciting. And Pinterest is your friend. I think I was going to share my Pinterest page, you could see, but I'm not sure that we have time. And if you want to do something adventurous and interesting, then work in collaboration. Find a stylist you can work with, or a makeup artist, or a florist, or an assistant, or friends, a group of friends, and you can create really interesting work. Or just yourself. A lot of work I do is by myself, and I plan what the shoot might be. So this was a 40s vintage shoot. So I sourced the images we use in a magazine, but I sourced the work at a vintage shop, and I met a makeup artist who talked about what we wanted. But the whole point is that I wanted to create a real 1940s feel. I used a space, I always borrow spaces to use, and I wanted to create like a Hitchcock story. So again, we had like you can do this yourselves, you know, you don't have to be a fashion photographer. You can find maybe a vintage place where they're interested in where they'll let you borrow the clothes, and they might even be interested in being part of it. And I wanted this story, which was like a Hitchcock vibe to it, and I used all the different spaces in the building. And I did a little storyboard as well. This is the same shoot. And obviously the clothes dictate in some ways what that image is going to look like. So yeah, I mean, that looks like, that was actually natural light, which is pretty amazing in this big old building. So this is a shoot I did with a jewelry and bridal company, and I got lots of people on board for it. So I tend to meet people, I work with them again. Hannah is one of them. So I knew that I wanted something interesting florally. So I worked with a florist, and we created like a backdrop. I'm always looking at the shape and just playing with these images. Again, it's Hannah on a different shoot, and this shoot, my light stopped working, so I just used available light and modeling light and reflectors and lamps to get the light I wanted. And this again was the same shoot, and we dressed up. That's a puffer fish. It's quite ridiculous, but we just wanted to create something interesting. So I'm playing around with some textures there, and this is like I used to do lots of kind of Wuthering Heights fashiony things in Haworth, and these are just a selection of fashion images, story images that I've taken. Some are professional shoots, and some are not amateur. Some are proper commission shoots, and some are just, you know, like that's a young girl, as is that, and it's just I work with them to create something that had more fashion for them. But it's playful. It's really exciting doing that kind of work. This is just a test shot. I was asked by a wool company to do some to spend a day doing some photography for them of all their hand knitted products. So that night we went out and we just did some tests. But I really like the light there, you know, and also I told you I'm a sucker for nice grasses. But two of the models in this were just young women. They weren't professional models. And that's the next day. So I did a whole a full-on day with this. I might share my Pinterest at some point. So this is the playful album cover shoot I did, and that actually is real. That's obviously a Photoshop, but that was playful and fun. Just experiment and you can have so much fun with these more creative shoots. So my tips, if you're wanting to do more story portraits or more fashion portraits, is plan them out, have ideas, sketch them out, draw little diagrams, make a storyboard, So though we're exploring some fashion shoots, I want you to remember that all those skills are transferable to any portrait shoots you do. And the most important thing I think is to remember is to play and to try things out and to be playful. So I have got I've put my Pinterest page there, but to show you some Pinterest. What I do if I'm working with a team, or even if I'm trying to think of ideas, I look at Pinterest and I Google things and I pin them to a board, and then they just really help me think more creatively sometimes if I'm stuck. Pinterest is your friend. And then sketch, jot down ideas, make storyboards, cut images out that you like, create really simple storyboards. And even in a portrait shoot, if I'm doing one, I often jot down and make a storyboard with different ideas because I can't always think. So we have all my websites, various websites, and my Kickstarter project, which I'm sure Angie will put under there, because that would be amazing if any of you can support that work. And I'd like you to think of any question you want to ask me, whatever level, however, no, there are no stupid questions. So I think that is probably it. So let me stop the share.
That was great. Thank you very much. Now, as usual, we've got lots of questions.
Good.
So
I'm pleased.
happy to race straight in.
Yes.
Okay. So sometimes you may have answered these during the course of your talk, but I think it doesn't hurt to kind of just reiterate a few bits because, you know, people might have missed it. And it's just nice to make sure everyone's got the message. So Annette has asked which lens and settings were used for the Poppy the student photograph.
For the what?
Poppy the student.
Oh, Poppy with who she was reading, that one.
I think so.
So I remember I had my 135mm lens on me, which was f or 2.8 for that.
Right.
So I'm not sure what the speed would have been, but it would have been a prime lens. So it could have been done on an 85, but it was, if I remember rightly, it was a 135mm lens.
Okay. When you say you got an 85 1.4, do you tend to use it wide open at 1.4?
I used to, but I stopped. I don't tend to go below 2.8.
Okay, just to get it.
Just to make sure it's
a little bit sharper.
Yeah, just to make sure that I have that face sharp.
Yeah.
And it depends on you. You know, I have quite an old, brilliant camera, but it depends on your camera and how large the sensor is. Sometimes the larger sensor is less forgiving on a wider aperture.
Yeah, it's definitely worth people experimenting, because if you shoot, the lenses have a sweet spot and with apertures. So, you know, if you shoot wide open, sometimes although you focus on the point of focus is focused, but it might not be quite as sharp as if you just close down a little bit. Yeah. And then as you close down further, say we start to get to f16, then you get diffraction coming in and things get softer and you got lots of depth of field. So it's worth playing around and finding the settings that you like.
I think so. And I think 2.8 is still wide depth of field. Oh no, narrow depth of field. Hold on.
Yeah.
Narrow, sorry.
Narrow depth of field.
Wide aperture, narrow depth of field.
It's interesting. A lot of people do talk about lots of depth of field now, and actually what they mean is lots of blur. So it's actually the opposite.
Yeah. So you know, I prefer the word blur to bokeh. I can never get my head around. Or I'm not even sure that's how you say it, but so yeah, blur background, a nice clear clean face, I think. Though obviously the picture I took for Oscar would have been 1.4, but I like that, my picture from years back.
Right, great. So Claire has asked, do you use fill-in flash on any of your pictures? I think that this is early on, bear in mind, some of your earlier pictures.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I think some of my later pictures, I will bounce flash. But I didn't really have a great grasp on using fill-in flash in my earlier days. So some of the ones I did of the shopkeepers, I did flash through umbrella as a light source. So that becomes like quite a big light source. But what I'll do, I don't use fill-in flash. I think I think so. I couldn't advise on that, I don't think. But I think you can look that up. But I will bounce. You can take a flash gun and bounce it. That's quite useful. Bounce it off a wall if it's too bright on the face.
Yeah.
Diffusion is the thing to go for.
Preferably a white wall.
Yes, definitely.
There's a yellow wall, you'll end up with a yellow
Yeah,
face.
yeah.
Sarah has observed that some of your early pictures almost look like they were shot on Fujifilm. Is that a look that you go for in your edit?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because my work's so different to that early work, but I'll still show that early work. So I think I always loved cinematic and film-like feel. So I think I just gravitated towards creating work, whether it was through the light, whether it was through how I processed. That was just what I loved to do. So it was kind of, I don't think I would think, oh, I'm going to make this into like Fuji whatever film, but I just gravitate to more cinematic, more filmic look in my digital images.
Right. Okay. Now there's a different Sarah with a different question. She has got a 4-week-old granddaughter, and her son and her daughter-in-law have asked her to take a few images of them all and some hands and feet shots. She's got a 50mm prime lens, and she was wondering if you could give her any advice, because she's only had that lens for 3 weeks. So obviously she's kind of still learning about it and adapting.
So I think that's perfect lens to use, because you go into smallish spaces. So I think you have it on a wide aperture. I'm not sure how fast your lens is, whether it's a 1.4 or 2.8, you know, but go for a wide aperture and get little details. Take your time, don't panic. Think about, so you can get lovely shots of parents and baby, and you can get little details of feet. I think bring some, they might ask them whether they've got any rugs with them, any soft things for the baby to lie on. I'm assuming that you're wanting to do a really beautiful lifestyle shoot. And go for, I think you can, I'm not sure, look around the house and look for nice light. And you can even kind of close the curtains a bit if it's a bit bright. So go for little details. You could even draw a little storyboard for yourself, and you can always go back more than once if it's your.
That's the advantage, isn't it, when they're closely related? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, and black and whites work quite nicely as well, I'd say.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, particularly with younger babies, because they tend to be quite red, don't they?
Yeah.
When they're very young. So
absolutely.
Consider black and white, and sometimes, you know, make them a little brighter than you might expect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question, Sarah. Annette says, do you use any modifiers on a speed light or a portable studio light?
Yeah, so on the speed light, I use an umbrella. I don't use speed lights that often now, but I used to stick speed light on and stick it through an umbrella. Sorry, I use an umbrella, speed light through the umbrella.
Yeah. Right.
And with the modifiers, I tend to use for my more portrait work. I often use Beauty Dish, I often use softbox, but I always diffuse. So the Beauty Dish is diffused, and then I'll add extra diffusion onto it. So I might add, I have a nice range of IKEA shower curtains and muslin that I just add on. I add extra layers on, and sometimes with those lights as well, I experiment with feathering them. So I move them slightly to the side. So I've kind of learned to play with them a bit. But yeah, I use, I'd say softboxes are great. Octoboxes are great, but they can be huge. But always diffuse.
Yeah. Okay. Laura says, what would you say are the best ways to get exposure for your work, and how to get your work out there? It's quite a big question, that, really.
That's a huge question.
And you did address it a little bit in your previous webinar.
Yeah, I think number one, I have Instagram, I have Twitter, I have Facebook. So I do share my work on there. And I think the thing is also comment on other people's work. Exposure is an interesting thing, because it depends whether you mean like the media. And so my work has had a lot of media exposure. Part of that is because I've been going for quite a long time now as a photographer, and the work has become quite well known, but I'm always sending it out. So if you've got a really great news story or a really good set of images, then photo editors are always interested in new images. They might never be upset if you don't hear from them, never be upset. You have to be kind of thick-skinned, really. Also enter competitions.
Yeah,
and
I think
be
that's a good one.
strict with your work, and don't be upset if you don't get anywhere. I've seen so many people enter competitions and believe that they should be chosen as a winner, and why are other people chosen when they're not? I've never understood that. I never expect to win. And when I cry, if I win anything, I cry, and I'm always grateful. And I always think there are so many other brilliant people around. So I just say, keep on building up your body of work, share that work, comment on other people's work, enter competitions, if you have a great project, put it together in a beautiful PDF, send it to picture editors.
Great idea, great advice. I would add to that, you know, we sort of touched on Instagram. I think whatever camera manufacturer you use, you know, have a look at how they hashtag their pictures, because obviously they will, or often, sorry, they will look at that hashtag, and they're looking for people who've tagged them and use certain hashtags. So, you know, make it easy for them to find you. And if you're, how should I put this? If you use a mixture of two different cameras, you know, say one day you use a Nikon and another day you use a Fuji, and you put a picture up, don't tag both, tag whichever camera you used, because they want to know that they're picking photographs that are from their cameras if they're going to use them. And the same for, you know, if there's a company you'd like to work with, have a look and see what sort of hashtags they use, and, you know, who they follow, that kind of thing. So just, you know, start a dialogue, basically.
Definitely.
Okay, Tracy has asked, how much direction do you give your subjects?
It depends, really. I think with I do give some direction, but I'd give it in a really gentle kind of way. So particularly with fashion shoots, obviously, I quite like working with people that aren't massively successful models, because I like to work slowly. I don't want somebody to be like doing loads of movements.
Mm-hmm.
I like to create the picture.
Yes.
So I try things out, and I'm looking very carefully at those people I'm working with, because I'm looking at how their hands are looking, the line of their body, and moving it, and getting them to move into slightly different positions. And I might just suggest that they lift their head up a bit, or their chin down, or I'm looking at telling them where to look, where their eyes should be. So I do give gentle directions. And I think with the more kind of the children I've worked with, I don't give loads of directions, but I might get them to sit somewhere, I might get them to play with something, and I might get them to look into the lens.
Actually, that reminds me of a question I was going to ask you, because you said get people to look at you but not stare at you, and I wondered how you explain the difference to them.
Well, I
You
stare.
having to bear out.
I do it myself. I just go, right, okay, I could go, or I could be looking. So I show them the difference. And also, if you're I explain that if you're looking into the lens, I want you to look as if you're looking at your eyes or looking at a person.
Right.
And then I will show what it might look like. I'll do a little clown-like stare.
Okay, I bet that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Suzanne has said, Carolyn, you mentioned the book when talking about the being in between, and I'm hoping to publish a lockdown portrait book, and wondered if you had any tips on book publishing and printing. Now, that was definitely covered in your last webinar, so it would be worth you having a look at that, Suzanne, but perhaps you could give a few quick tips there.
Yeah, I think lockdown books, I think it depends whether you are looking for a publisher, and looking for a publisher is very, very hard, or whether you're looking at self-publishing, because you can look at things like Blurb or Bob Books. I think that there are lots and lots of photographers doing lockdown. In some ways, lockdown will be more interesting in the future than it is at the moment. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I think what you may find is that people might be thinking, I don't really want to look at what we've just experienced.
Yes.
but they may well be interested in a year or two, because it is a moment of history. So I would encourage you to look at your work, edit it, look at it, the flow of it. And if you feel it's really strong, then again, put it in a PDF and send it to publishers. But remember that they're all struggling at the moment, and you might not get the response that you would like, but I think there's no harm in getting it out there.
Yeah, great advice. Wendy says, oh, do you have any tricks for getting the mouth position? So we spoke about the eyes and the not staringness. So, you know, do you get people to say a specific word, or, you know, grimace and then relax, or anything like that?
Yeah, no, actually what I do, so I don't necessarily get them to say a word. I just want their mouths to be relaxed. And often people are very, you know, quite tense. So I work on their relaxation. And I will just say, just soften your mouth, just loosen your jaw a tiny bit, just soften your mouth. Blow a raspberry, that's what I do. Go.
Stop at dribbling. Don't relax that
don't
much.
dribble. But okay. I'll look at positions of neck, and you know, I think we as women, but also men, I've got a big neck at the moment. So what I always do, like I do this turtle thing, which is like chin forward and down. So I've heard
it described as ears forward.
Oh, have you? All right.
Yeah, push your ears forward, because don't do that. But.
Yeah. So I'll work with people on that as well.
Okay. Want to try them.
Yes.
Kathy has said she's been very taken by your confidence, and she enjoyed the first SheClicks session on creative confidence, which is nice to know. How much has your past experience of being an actor helped with this? And how has your experience of being directed on stage influenced how you direct a shoot? That's an interesting question.
That's a brilliant question. So number one, if you listen to my last talk, I think I talked about being scared of stuff. Yeah, so my confidence is only when I'm presenting, and my confidence is when I'm doing. But the other time, I often feel really nervous and worried and anxious before a shoot, which is why I tend to plan a lot. In terms of creating directing work, well, I went from acting, being directed, to being a director. So as having the experience of being a director, I'm really familiar with working and creating a scene that I would like. And that's how I think that translates. So I think every bit of our previous experience, no matter where you were, what you've come through, you can use to enhance your practice. But yes, there is an element of the performer, but I'm like a wreck in every other time. Not really, I'm not a complete wreck, but yeah, I do suffer from the same nerves that other people do.
Okay, so you just managed to control them or conceal them well.
Yeah, I feel fine when I'm doing this. I actually quite like this. I feel really excited to be sharing things with people. So I don't worry. I think I've done it enough times to know that, you know, if you're going to do it, people want to hear what you have to say. They don't want you to trip up and make mistakes, do they?
No.
If you do trip up and make mistakes, it's fine as well. Just laugh.
Yeah. That's it. Everyone's just wishing you well, sort of thing, aren't they? So
yeah,
fine. Right. So Hannah has asked, you mentioned using artificial light. What advice do you have for using artificial light effectively?
I think use it. Start with one light at a time. And there's loads of videos now where you can see light being used really well. One light, so get used to using one light, and always diffuse the light and move the light. And I remember going, actually it was Nikon, bizarrely enough. I won a little Nikon competition, and I won a little course with Nikon. This was a long time ago. And I said to them, I'm a bit worried. And they went, what are you worried about? I said, I just don't think I understand light. They went, what do you mean you don't understand light? So I said, well, I move my light everywhere. Whenever I'm working, I don't, you know, other people seem to have these setups, but I just move my light. And they said, but that's good, Carolyn. That's good. And I went, is it? So they said, yeah, because you obviously are really using it properly. You don't rely on the setup. So I'd say experiment and look at softer light, how you can get a softer light by diffusing it, by moving your light slightly, having your light slightly above and moving it to the side. I'm not being very helpful there. If I had my lights with me, I'd be able to show you.
I think practice and experimentation are probably.
Yeah, I think so. When I did that television program, and I was terrified of light, and not only was I terrified, I was going to be filmed doing something I had no experience of. And Joy Gregory, who was my mentor, said to me, and I think I said this in my talk today, she went, "Carolyn, light is light." And I went, "Oh yeah." Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we see it all the time. We're quite used to it.
Yeah.
And we know how to control it with curtains and blinds and things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
just get a bit worked up when it's coming out of a flash gun sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Elizabeth has asked where you placed the focus for Freya through the rainy window.
Oh yeah, so I would have focused on her eyes, and that, you know, I think it depends on how much condensation there is on the window, but I focused on her eyes, and I showed you the color version of that where you can see she's in the car, but the focus will always be, if I'm doing a face, will always be on the eyes.
Annette said, do you ever add textures or effects to your portraits, and would you use brushes to create the story?
I used to. You know, that's what I used to do. And with that, the album cover, I used textures on that because they wanted me to. I think now I tend not to use them unless I'm just playing, I'm being playful or creative. Yeah. But I tend to work in a cleaner way now. But I did used to definitely, you know, back in the day, and lots of people use textures now, don't they, I think. But I try to make, you know, if I'm gonna use texture, then I want it to look good. I don't want it to be random use of texture. So I'm kind of thinking about the whole picture and why I might use that texture in that picture.
Right. Yeah. Make sure it sort of fits in. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And also the really important thing I learned was that your picture has to be good before you put your texture. Don't use the texture to make your picture look better.
Right. So, yes, that's a very good point. Yes.
Which lots of people do, and I think I probably did years ago, but now I you know, if I was to do it, I would make sure that picture worked really well before I added to it.
So it's a difference between enhancing and concealing, isn't it? I suppose. Yeah. You know, trying to. Yeah. Okay. Fran has a shoot with her sister-in-law lined up to help with her portfolio. She's sister-in-law's not a model, and she's not used to being in front of a camera. So how do you recommend she could get the most out of that shoot? But it sounds like a good opportunity.
And it's a brilliant opportunity. And it may be that you do more than one shoot with her, because maybe it's also, I'm not sure how experienced you are as a photographer, but I would say I do things like, even I start off with somebody with their eyes shut and breathing, and then I just move it very slowly. I might get them to move their head slightly and then open their eyes and look at me. You know, often moving the shoulder that way. I think just, number one, have fun. Number two, work slowly. Number three, think about, you could draw a little plan of what you would quite like, and look at light in the background, and very simple instructions to her.
Yeah.
Until she feels quite relaxed, and she might be a natural, you don't know really.
Yes. Yeah, but you never know, she might just get straight into it. Yeah. Fran doesn't say how experienced she is as a photographer, but I guess it might be interesting. I mean, Carolyn, would you ever show a model the sort of picture you want to take? So, you know, I've seen this, I really like this, let's see if we can recreate it, or anything like that?
Occasionally. I mean, Pinterest is really good for that, where you can get a feel for the kind of shoot you want, and it might be there's a certain position that you like in a picture. I tend not to, but sometimes I will, if I feel actually I'm a bit stuck, or I really love this, and let's see whether we can try to not replicate it, but try to get something similar. Then yeah, you can use Pinterest, and you can put it on your phone as well.
Right.
So that's
useful. That's very useful. Just seen it's popped up, she's moderately experienced as a photographer, so that's a great starting point. I think
that's a brilliant starting point.
In. Yeah. Have some fun. I think make some cakes. Take some cakes along. Okay. Trish has asked, if you were choosing between a 50mm and an 85mm lens, which would you choose? Sounds like Trish might be going shopping.
I would always go for 85 if
Hmm.
I could use it. But 50 is really good because
Yeah.
50 you can use in tighter spaces. So
Is it
80,
worth mentioning that you use full frame, don't you?
I use full frame, but I use some of those. Picture of Oscar was not on a full frame camera,
Right. Okay.
so I just love that lens.
Mhm.
I think get both.
But
Sorry.
it is something to bear in mind, Trish. If you've got a full frame camera, then 85mm will look quite different. Well, it will look quite different compared to if you put it on an APS-C format camera, because it will be a lot tighter crop. So it's just something to bear in mind. You might find actually you prefer 50mm,
Yeah,
but I get what you're talking about. And obviously, as you get longer lenses, you get more background blur at the same aperture. So
yeah. And I think if it's the first one, then get a second-hand 50.
mm.
Get used to using it, and then save up for a really good 85.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about 50mm lenses, like the f1.8s,
Yeah,
they're not that expensive, and
no.
especially if you go second hand. And actually, they're usually pretty good as well, because they're like a really simple lens to make. So, I mean, I couldn't make one, but somebody who knows what they're doing, they're relatively simple optically, so you can get really good results. So, yeah, have a look at the prices.
Yeah.
Starting point. Okay, Maxine, can we have a copy of the PowerPoint she did? Well, actually, Maxine, this webinar is being recorded, so it's probably easier that you rewatch the webinar, I
And
think.
take notes. Yeah.
Yeah, take notes. Okay. Right. Where are we? Okay. What is the best way to improve learning with regards to light? She asked. Practice.
Practice YouTube. Felix, I've forgotten his surname, is really good. Shall I give you a name of good person to look at?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Felix Kunz on YouTube is brilliant. He's such a great. I'm just trying to find. Oh.
Actually, you know what? I'm just going to chuck in another name, Hannah Cousins.
Oh yeah.
She's really good to watch, and she
Yeah.
does lots of fun videos, and she's done quite a lot on just using one light.
She's really good, isn't she?
Mm.
Yeah. So Felix Kunz is Felix Kunze. He's really talented photographer, and he's brilliant at using lights, and he teaches really well, I think, as well.
Okay, so that's two people to look out for.
Yeah.
Felix and Hannah. Fantastic. There are loads more, obviously. They're just two that popped into our heads. Great. And Hannah has actually done a webinar for us a while ago, so you might want to look that up. She was talking about capturing character. Right. So, Kay, sorry, she has asked. Oh no, sorry, we've just done that one. Okay, I'm confused. Kathy says, "Is there?" Yes, she's asking about recording. Sorry, I should read these before I start. Elizabeth, she had some headshots done for her website by a local professional photographer, but she hated them because they were such high definition. You could see every pore on my skin.
Oh, no.
Fortunately, her camera isn't that sort of quality, but if she gets a better one, how can you get a sharp face without seeing every blemish and pore?
So you want, yeah, people over sharpen pictures. It could be that I'm assuming, sorry, it might not have been a male photographer that took your photo. Sorry, the photographer. I try to work with people so that it's really flattering, and that's about your use of light, how you use the light and how you use diffused light, and that can make a massive difference. So if the light is harsh, then you'll see everything.
Yeah.
But if you use beautiful soft light, it will work really well, and natural light too. I think sometimes people over sharpen as well in post processing. So it might be that this photographer just thought it looked good to sharpen. So I think soft light you're using, and don't over sharpen in post-processing.
Yeah, because you can selectively sharpen. There's a lot of people, sometimes they want a bit more pep in the eyes, and you could just sharpen the eyes.
Yeah, but
And
I would actually say don't do that, because then you can end up with alien eyes.
Oh, there are limits, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Be careful.
Thing...
If you do that, do it tiny bit, not a big bit.
Yes, don't go mad.
Yeah.
Yes, because you can result like you've got a marker pen going around your eye, your pupil. Also, you know, if you do shoot wide open and you make sure that the focus is exactly on your eyes, then like parts of your face won't be super sharp.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we've got one more question, which was from Sue, and she asked whether you ever shoot on a tripod or whether you always use handheld shots.
I tend to use handheld shots.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think, when I shoot on a tripod, I do sometimes, but that's, you know, obviously if I have a very low shutter speed or, yeah, I've shot on a tripod when I'm doing a big, huge commercial shoot and I've got 10 people in the shot and I can't afford, and it has to be quite a slow shutter speed.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about how fast my camera is going. So I tend not to shoot ever below 80. Mm-hmm. What is it? How do I express that? The shutter speed is 80, but that's an 80. Is that
an 80th of a second?
80th of a second. Mm-hmm. So I tend to go 125 is my happy speed.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on your shutter speed.
Okay. So yeah, 125th would give you, it would rule out any, or it should rule out camera shake.
Should do.
With an 85
mm. And 80 is fine as well if you hold it right. If you're not a shaky person.
Not too many espressos.
Yes.
Well, Carolyn, that's been a really interesting talk, and everyone's saying they really enjoyed it and found it very inspiring. So thank you very much again.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone, all I can say is if I can do it, you can. It takes lots of hours practice, but seriously, it's just kind of wanting to learn more and practicing and not being afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, and I know you said that you have been photographing for a long time, but actually in the scheme of things, it's 13 years. That's not that long. You know, you weren't born with a camera in your hand.
No,
it's not that long. So it is all about having fun, having practice. And we've got the benefit of digital photography now. It doesn't cost nearly so much as it used to when you tried to practice with film.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, everyone, for being very patient.
Oh, it's lovely to see you again. Thanks very much, Carolyn.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.